So let me introduce Colin Donahue, the CSUN's Vice President, and Jorge Reyes, come on down, President of CSUN Associates, to talk briefly about some of those needs you've got here. Jorge? Colin? Here you go. Okay, Colin, let's talk about, you briefly mentioned this, President Harrison talked about this, but let's make sure it's clear. Let's talk about how many students are on campus. Let's talk about staff and faculty and the number of trips per week in terms of the demand. You need a microphone? In terms of the demand here on the campus as we look for the big picture of the San Fernando Valley, particularly with respect to both the campus and with respect to the issue of parking in the neighborhoods.
Right, so you heard the number before of 200,000 weekly trips to and from Cal State Northridge. And you've also heard the number of 50,000 students, mostly students, faculty, and staff here in the CSUN community. One other important one to throw out is, of that 50,000, 25,000 of those live within a 10-mile radius of CSUN. More than half of our employees live within nearly 60% live within 10 miles, and about half our students. That's a huge number, and if you draw that circle, when we look at that, that goes from basically around Sylmar, if you go to the upper right, down to Woodland Hills. So that's a critical region for us to reach, and what I'd throw out is, Stuart did a good job of describing some of the major infrastructure, and if you think about light rail on the East Valley Corridor running down basically the east side of the 405 freeway, and then you have the orange line shadowing the 101, CSUN is in a very strategic location. Because if you want to finish that box, I guess you could go out to Topanga Canyon and you could go to the 118. CSUN's right in the middle of that. So the point I would make is it's critical for our students, but it's also very critical for this community to address this issue. We had a great meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Northridge Vision Group, which has all of the leads and the presidents of the neighborhood councils here locally, Northridge East, South, and West. And we talked about this. What's this community going to look like in 10 or 20 years if we don't do something? It's a critical issue of livability in this part of the valley. So there's big numbers there. We think we can be the solution. And Stephanie mentioned our transit station. And if you look at what happened there, in 2012, we christened that. That was done with a grant, a fairly small grant, about $400,000 that came through a Metro. It was a great partnership. Mitch was directly involved with that in getting a light in at Reseda Boulevard and Vincennes to make the bus access possible into the transit station. But that transit station is a strategic location, not just for Cal State Northridge, but for this entire region. And there's plenty of capability, without a lot of dollars, frankly, to expand the capacity of that. To serve bus rapid transit, as we talked about, down to the Orange Line, but we also need to look at bus rapid transit to connect to that East Valley Rail so that there's a convenient way to get here to Cal State Northridge and we can get people to use it. We continue to say we have a chicken and egg issue here at Cal State Northridge. It's really hard when we work with Metro to just start looking at numbers, because it has to be accessible for folks for them to use it in the first place. It has to be efficient and timely. The last thing I would say is, if you look at our strategic location and you look at MetroLink, we're key. If we do those couple of things, we have those 2 rapid bus lines, and frankly, we should be looking also at the MetroLink station here in Northridge and potentially moving that over onto directly adjacent to Reseda Boulevard. All of a sudden, when you draw that out, we have a completely connected system for the valley and for the entire region, because it will connect the Ventura County MetroLink line as well as the Antelope Valley line. And if you look at some of these maps we have here, one of them shows the trains, and it's the most interesting one for me, because if you look at Santa Clarita, you don't see any color at all. And I can tell you right now, I live in Santa Clarita, so I know this, people would love to ride the train, our students and our staff from Santa Clarita, but you stop in Sylmar and you don't have a convenient way to get to Cal State Northridge. Now, if we have this integrated system with the light rail and we can take bus rapid transit, it will work.
I want to talk about connect as it relates to CSUN and CSUN students, connecting the Northeast Valley with the Northwest Valley, right? You can argue, oh, we don't need transportation, but you just talked about 25,000 students, right? Or is it 25%?
25,000 of this
25,000
population,
in 10
half the
miles,
people here.
and and the significant number are coming, students who live in the Northeast Valley are coming to CSUN and literally don't have any reliable transportation to get here. Is that correct?
It's absolutely correct. The other thing you'll notice on some of these maps, if you look at sort of the heat islands there, some of the most underserved populations in our community are the ones that don't have good service. If you look at, for example, if you go further out and you look at the areas around downtown LA and South LA and East LA, those areas are dark brown on those maps, meaning 50% of our students that live there are dependent on transit to get to Cal State Northridge. George can probably talk really well about how long it takes for those students to get here.
Give us some examples, George. Put a human face on this. You talked about it briefly, but give us a little bit more, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. I just want to thank Stephanie, too, for listening to our student concerns, in particular the ones that relate to night students. For example, as here at CSUN, we have night students as well as graduate students like myself. So our class ends at 9:45 p.m., and the last bus leaves at 9:30 p.m. So that means I have to leave my class early to go take the bus to go home. There's also issues where our students had to give up job opportunities or internship opportunities because there's not enough transportation that takes them from point A to point B, or there's not enough transportation that comes very rapidly. So we have to wait 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. I think at the end, there's no jobs that are gonna take that flexibility because really we don't have any flexibility as students. There's also the issue that, for example, 1 hour before this event started, I got an email from a student parent who said she couldn't make it to the transportation summit because of transportation issues. And actually, our student government today allocated $600 for students to come to the summit, and we'll give them a ride back home through Uber or Lyft because we wanted to hear their concerns. But still, this student couldn't make it here on campus, and she's a student parent who wakes up at 5 a.m., takes her bus at 6:15 in the morning, gets here for her 9:30 a.m. class. Her classes ends at 12:30 p.m., and she still has to wait till 5:30 p.m. to take the direct line to Oxnard. So she's waiting here 4 hours to not see her children, so just to wait for the bus. And that's something that we want to make sure that gets fixed.
Boy, you couldn't say any better than that.
Now that's
We've
one.
been talking about and circulating among folks an idea to get again, I know the planning takes forever, you know, I mean, I'm an entrepreneur that want everything done yesterday, and government plans stuff in decades, but the idea is to do a bus rapid transit that would connect Canoga along Nordhoff and come all the way along Nordhoff in front of the campus, come all the way east up Osborne, and connect to San Fernando, Brian. So that what you have a top line across the valley, and then one more line if based upon what Stewart says, you're gonna have a line that's gonna come up Van Nuys, and then you're gonna have, ultimately in terms of the plan, and you've got something coming up Canoga, have another BRT of some sort in and around the Reseda area. So what you've done now, if someone's going along the orange line in the south part of the valley, they can connect up to Northridge and come to the transportation center. We now have a parallel line across the top of the valley that connects the East Valley with the West Valley. And you begin, as you look at the grid, as you look at the big picture map in terms of this long investment that we're looking to do, you have a framework that really you can hang all of the other pieces and parts on local return, but you have a backbone of the valley that we used to have a long time ago, you know, with the orange line and some of the other lines that we had, but you really have the valley connected, and you also have the Northeast Valley and also the Northwest Valley having something in this to also vote for this. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to do two things in all of this, if it works. One is to come up with a brilliantly intelligent use of money to do something that really helps people. Stories like this, the woman, the mother who takes classes here and trying to give her a real life and use transportation. And two, do something that gives relief to all different communities so that we can get this thing passed, as the mayor expressed how hard it is to get something like this passed.
Bob?
And so, yeah,
No, finish your thought.
please, I'm done.
No, I was just going to say, to add to what you were saying, and I know we want to get some questions from the audience, the idea is to give people options. I mean, not everything works for everyone, but the goal is to give you as many choices and options as we possibly can, so that someday you may have to take the car, but the next day there's a rapid bus, or there's, a light rail system, something else for you to use when you have the time or the opportunity to do it. It's all about creating options. That was what Measure R was about. That's what this next phase is all about. And that's why your input was so important in terms of starting this dialogue with Cal State Northridge and the MTA, in terms of creating those options. The other thing that's going to be important, and I'm not going to put Stephanie on the spot tonight, we're going to wait a week for that till the MTA comes out with their draft plan, a week from tomorrow, I believe. There's two of the big variables in transportation are how much money you get, but sometimes it's more important what year you get it in. And I think in a lot of ways, particularly as we talk about the Orange Line and the buses, early money is more important. What can be done in the first 5 years, for instance? That's why I was very encouraged when Stephanie was talking about the work they've already started on the grade separations. And again, a grade separation is, the cars stay at the current grade. You'd go underneath for the trains at the intersections, so the cars don't have to slow down except for the red lights, hopefully. And the train goes underneath, so it doesn't have to slow down for the red lights or the intersection because it's separated from the vehicles. So the fact that that work has already started, again, is an indication of giving people options. Last thing, we'll go to questions. For those of you who are Bob's age or my age, who remember the Olympics in 1984, everyone in LA thought we'd sort of died and gone to heaven because of the traffic. How many people thought we took 50% of the cars off the road at that point? We took 5% of the cars off the road. And that was the difference. So when we look at these investments in transportation, somebody may say, that's a pretty expensive system. But if it takes 1 or 2% off here and 1 or 2% off there, we don't need to get 50% as much as we'd love to have 50% out of their cars. But to make this system function, we need to take 5 or 10%, which is why we're trying to create as many options as possible.